And okay, it is now recording, supposedly. And I guess we can go ahead and get started.
Awesome.
Perfect.
So one of you two, Joe, why don't you go ahead and talk about the Drone Pilot Social Hour for those of you who don't know what it is.
I'm sorry, say again, Vic.
Why don't you tell us what Drone Pilot Social Hour is?
Okay. Yeah, there's a few new folks in here. Before COVID hit, we got together on a monthly basis, a social hour, which we would meet up at a different brewery across the Denver metro area. And basically,
Vic would always buy.
absolutely, yeah. And basically, what we're about is we were all 107 guys or future 107 folks, and we would network, we would inspire, we would assist, and we shared a lot of good information. And from this group that we started 2 years ago, we're going on 2 years here, I guess.
Yeah, we are.
We've met a lot of cool and neat people, and it grows, and that's what we're about. And good friends, and really gotten to get a whole bunch of good information. And again, the camaraderie is probably the best out of everything else. So
absolutely.
So anyway, that's what we're about, and we're blessed to have Vic with us. There's Armando.
I was just going to ask, where's Armando?
Yeah.
About time he shows up.
So yeah, that's what we're about, folks, for the new folks here just joining us. And initially, we were going to do this call with just a few of our core members to discuss the upcoming change in regulations and proposals and everything. And Vic is in the thick of it. But then we started thinking about, well, let's throw in a few more people. So it's a late thought, but you're here, and we'll go from there. So without any further ado, I'm going to throw the mic over to Vic, and let's talk about what's going on.
The biggest issue, let's just start out with the biggest issue, which I did let them know Sunday afternoon when I read it in no uncertain terms, was pilot location is still going to be part of remote ID. So we're working on that. The FAA is working on that. They know it's an issue. So won't dive into too much there tonight, but they know it's an issue, and they will get it at least addressed at this point. When I start these things, and I've done a number of them, some of you may have seen me on Bardwell's channel, been on a few other channels, that the first thing we need to worry about is not to worry about it. Don't freak out. Don't panic. We're talking 30 months plus 2 months before we even have to worry about the remote ID. So don't worry about that. Everybody's stressing out about it, and there's no reason to. So what I'll do real quick, and what we'll do this time, because it goes, we could do this for 3 or 4 hours. We're not going to. I'm going to go over a quick summary and then just kind of open up to Q&A, because the Q&A is where everything gets answered. The important thing to do is there's 2 dates you need to keep in mind. One is date of publication, and one is date of implementation. Date of publication is when the Federal Register actually publishes the rule, publishes the law, well, the rule. It's not codified yet. It's just in the register. And so, excuse me, that could happen tomorrow. That could happen 2 weeks from now. The FAA gave it to them when they gave it to us. So they've had it for 10 days now. Whatever that is. I can't think anymore at this point. So as soon as that is published, then there's a 60-day time clock that starts, and then that's the date of implementation. So at 60 days after publication, the law goes into effect. The rules go into effect. I'm still not sure if it's a law or a rule. Oh, well, it doesn't matter. It's the way we're supposed to do things. So, but that 60-day, for the most part, that date of implementation, then starts a bunch of other clocks. And Frederick's sitting there going, oh, shit, don't worry about it. It's good. The first thing that happens, and we're going to go over the rules that are coming down and remote ID, because it's 2 separate things, although they were dropped on the same day. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go in order of when they're going to become active. Okay. The first one that's going to become active is ops over people and night ops and recurrency, but we'll do that here in just a minute. Ops over people. Let's go with night ops first, because that's going to be the easiest to explain, and it's all black and white. There's no gray. There's no nothing. Night operations, if you have a 10729 waiver, it is going away. 120 days after publication, your waiver is dead. It is no longer any good. Because night operations are going to become part of the recurrent test, except it's no longer recurrent test, it's recurrent training, but we'll get into the specifics of that. The reason for that is there's been, how many thousands, hundreds of, well, maybe tens of thousands, let's just go with that, night operations that have gone flawlessly. We know what we're doing. The FAA has decided that, this isn't what they thought it was going to be. It's not going to be that big a deal. I do predict a lot of night crashes when this first happens, but once that's out of the way, I think we're going to be in good shape. Night rules will be part of the UGR and also part of the initial test from now on. Well, 60 days, the date of implementation, that's how it's going to be. So the night ops and the over people ops questions are going to be on both the recurrent and the initial. So the night ops side, you go in and you take your recurrent training. It is no longer recurrent test. You do not schedule it. So that's nice. But 45 days after publication, so 15 days before implementation, you can actually go on FAA.gov and take the recurrent training. So I strongly suggest you do that, because if you wait for 60 days when it becomes effective, the FAA has already determined that their website's going to crash. You've got 200,000 plus people going on to take their recurrent training, and everybody's going to want to do it. The thing is, if you take it early, like between the 45 and 60 day time period, you can't utilize what you know or what you've done until it becomes effective. So let's say you go in on the 45th day and you take your recurrent training and you pass it, which I'm not sure what it looks like yet. I'm hoping to get a copy of it, but I don't think I'm going to. You take your training. If any part, well, Joe would know, if it's going to be very similar to the Part 61 stuff, Part 61 stuff.
So Vic, just let me clarify. So 45 days after the date of publication, you can go in and take the recurrent training session online. And then 60 days after publication, that's when you can go in and take the test?
The test, there's no test. It's all training. There is no test anymore for recurrency. You take the training module and you're done.
So if you take that training module 46 days after publication, once the 60 days hits, then you're good.
Then you're good. So you're current automatically when the effective date comes into account. Okay. And if you don't have a waiver and you take it at 46 days, and then 14 days later, as soon as it becomes effective, you can now fly at light legally.
So
or fly at night legally.
Let me get this straight.
Go for it.
I'm current for my recurrency. I have a waiver. In 45 days, I'm going to have to take a recurrency test plus the night exam, or just the night exam?
The night questions are on the recurrency test, or the current.
So I have to take
I'm even doing it wrong. On the currency training,
I have to do my recurrency training, which will cover the whole gamut again.
Yep.
Except for weather.
To keep my waiver live.
Except for weather.
It's going to be weather's going to include it too. Everything that's on the initial will be on the training. Yep. That way, it's easier.
Gotcha.
So
that's not easier for me, but it's easier for them.
Okay. It's easier for them, and I don't know exactly what that test is going to look like yet. They haven't given me an advanced copy, and I probably won't get an advanced copy on that. But yeah, if you're current and you don't have a waiver and you don't fly at night, you don't have to worry about taking that training until you need your currency. So it's not like all of a sudden everybody has to become current again. If somebody took their UGR this month and they don't ever want to fly at night, they have until February 1st of 2023 to take the recurrency training on the FAA.gov. So
I would hope that they would model that this training is very similar to what they do for the Part 61 pilots who want to renew their 107.
Yeah, it's very similar to that. But since Part 61 guys know all the other stuff with their other training, there will be other stuff like airspace and that kind of stuff, and the specific 107 rules like they have on the Part 61 training. Yeah,
You know, Dave,
but it will be a separate test.
yeah, you know, guys, I suspect it's going to be like the Part 61 deal where you go in there, they're going to make you look at some PowerPoint slides or some movies to do what, because that whole FAA.gov, I've gone on there both as an aircraft pilot and maintainer, and there's all kinds of stuff for currency. For example, those who know or may not know, you got to be licensed to work on aircraft. It's called an A&P license. Once you get an A&P, you're good forever. But a lot of people push some kind of training on you where they like to, sometimes your employer likes to see you go out and do some remedial training. That's not a mandate, but there is another rating on top of an A&P license called an inspection authorization. That you have to go every 2 years. Boy, amazing how that works. Every 2 years, you got to go get recertified. And with an IA, the way you do that is you either do X amount of what they call annual inspections. You have to sign off forms. I'm not going to go into the specifics. Or you take 8 hours worth of training for every 2 years of your IA. So you could see how the FAA is aligning a lot of this stuff together with different aspects of the aviation industry and different disciplines of what, if I could coin a phrase, remote pilot, maintainers, it's all the same. Anyway, right. That FAA.gov, if you guys have ever gone through that, there's a whole bunch of classes that are on there. And again, somewhere in there is going to be our little 107 training course, which it is right now for the Part 61 guys.
Yeah, that's what it'll be. That's what it'll be. So any more questions about night ops? We also kind of covered recurrent too at the same time. Is that, because I'm going to move on to ops over people, but I don't want to move on.
Vic, I got a question. So sure. will you, just to reiterate one more time, I just renewed my 107. I just went in there as a Part 61 pilot. I do not have a night waiver. So I do want to I want to fly at night. Mm-hmm. So where I am right now, I just did my deal. So when can I go fly at night?
If you take your recurrent with you have to take the 107 recurrent, and I'm not quite sure how it's going to work with Part 61s, but you do have to take your 107 recurrent. That includes the night op questions.
Got it. So I got to take my recurrent again, and it'll have the night. For free online when the feds put that in there. Okay.
Yep. And when is that going to be available again?
It's going to be available 45 days after publication, but not effective until the effective date 60 days after publication.
So
you'll just have a 15-day window if that you can't utilize it unless you already have your waiver. You've got a waiver, Armando, don't you?
Yeah, him and I both went through your class, and neither one of us went and did it.
Good, there we go. I like that.
Yeah.
I think I'm a remote pilot in command a lot.
So yeah, and now remember though, if you have your waiver already, if you've already got your 2.9, 120 days from publication, it expires. It's gone. There's not going to be any more 107 2.9 waivers. So if you want to continue to fly at night, you've got to do, you've got to take your recurrency. I don't know if that's a word. You have to take your recurrent training. So waivers, night waivers going away. Now, real quick, while I'm thinking about that, I just had 29 COAs renewed with my 107 2.9 attached to it. Wide area authorizations, including one at DIA that has the night ops with it. And I have to fly there once a month at night in a zero grid. So I've got a very specialized COA with my night waiver attached to it. We're not sure how that's going to work yet. The FAA is working with ATC on that to figure out how you can then get a COA or a 4.1 or whatever with night ops attached to it. Lance will not be night op active yet. So that is a big, huge piece they're working on, and a big, huge piece that affects me personally. Plus, I'll fly at night at Kappa. So that is yet to be figured out. That's always a question that comes up. So can we go over at ops over people, or do we want to stay here for a minute? Because we can come back for Q&A.
Question for you if you don't mind.
Oh, hi, Elaine. Go for it.
Hi, sorry, I'm the new guy, new girl in town, I guess.
Don't worry about it. That's why we're here.
So I was originally looking to take my Part 107 within like the next 30 days or so, but it sounds like maybe I should wait until this comes out so that I can get all the night stuff in on my initial testing and not have to do anything additional afterwards, correct?
If you want to, if you're ready for your 107, I strongly suggest you take it now.
Okay.
You're talking about your initial, right? Because you're not 107
Yes.
yet, right? Okay, go ahead. If you're ready, take it. Because that way you've got it and you don't have to learn more stuff. And then when you're ready to take the recurrent, you can just take it whenever you want and it's free. So if you want to start flying at night, or if you're, once we get into the ops over people, I can talk to you about that. If you want to start flying with ops over people, when it's available, then you can go in and take your free recurrent and you just have your own 107 for whatever, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. So I would take it now while you, if you're ready for it, I would take it now. Actually, I haven't talked to somebody about it initially yet. That's kind of funny.
Yeah.
Everybody
Right.
ready?
So I'll.
And we can
Yep.
come back. If something pops up, we can come back.
Got it.
Ops over people. Okay. This is where it gets a little confusing because part of it literally takes place date of implementation. We can legally fly over people, date of implementation under one of the categories. You're going to have 4 categories. Let me grab, I got so much paper around here. Let's see if I've got it. Where's my ops over people? Okay. We're going to have 4 categories, like I said. We're only going to talk about 3 because the 4th category is for the big boys. They're going to have airworthiness certificates in the whole 9 yards and probably 135 instead of 107. It's the whole 9 yards. So we're not going to talk about that other than to say, if you're flying in category 4, you're going to have a whole lot of people filling out your paperwork and lawyers are going to be involved. So that is probably nobody in this Zoom call. So let's start with category 1. Category 1 will go into effect on the final rule effective date. The criteria is it has to weigh less than 250 grams and it can have no exposed parts, no exposed rotating parts that can lacerate skin. So that means a Mavic Mini does not qualify.
It's 55. It's
have a cage
255,
on it.
right?
Yeah, there's 250. No, it's 249. The Mini's 249, but you've got the lacerating, you've got the rotating parts that lacerate skin. So what you would have to do is put prop guards on it. Well, now you're over 250.
You're over the weight.
You're over the weight. So as of right now, the only drones I know of that would qualify would be.
Where's that little guy?
There's the Tello.
What's your
Nope.
your Estes
This
Proto?
little guy right here with my Naked 6 on it. So the Cinewhoops, you can't even see. The Cinewhoops with ducted fans, with ducted blades, if they're under 250, will qualify.
Well, Tello might qualify. I don't think there's prop guards for Tello, are there?
I have no idea. I've never flown a Tello.
I have a Tello. I'm gonna check that
You
out.
do a little investigating and get your cocaine scale out and see if it's 250 grams.
Oh, the Tello comes with prop guards.
Oh, it
Okay.
does? Is it
All right.
250 grams?
I have
Alright.
no
Okay,
idea. I gotta get my
if it's
cocaine
250
crack
grams,
thing. Hey Joe, can I come over and weigh my thing with you?
You can weigh your we'll weigh our Tellos together.
there you go. So anyway, what we can do, if the Tello, then that's going to count. If it's got prop guards and it's under 250. However, remote ID is tied to the over people ops, okay, over people rules. Even though the 250 grams, so category 1 is you can fly the first day of implementation. You can't fly a sustained flights over crowds. So I think the wording is sustained flights over crowds. I'm just going to go with crowds. Basically, sustained flights, I ask, is if you're going over, if you're hovering, if you're going to go around it on the corners, if you're cutting directly across, open air assemblies. That's the word I was looking for. So their definition of open air assemblies is open-ended. So I would just say any crowd. 16th Street Mall on Halloween is probably going to be an open air assembly. 16th Street Mall, or whatever the one at Boulder is, it's an assembled group of people. You cannot fly sustained flights over them. You can just fly, like, let's say down the 16th Street Mall on a Friday morning. I mean, that's probably not an open air assembly. So until RID comes out, actually until the drone is RID compliant, RID does not have to be effective yet, but RID, remote ID, if the drone is remote ID compliant, then you can fly category 1 over sustained people right away. But I guarantee nobody's RID compliant because the standards aren't there yet. Category 2 and 3 have a lot to do with kinetic energy transfer damage is a good way to put it. So you have to have, well, we won't go into it, but the exact numbers, they need to be bumped up because as of right now, even like you'd have to have a Mavic with a parachute. And even then, that's going to be really close to qualifying for category 2. The kinetic energy transfer that Assure basically set up is what they're going off of. We hope to get that changed. We may not. That just may be the way it is. So the Mavics with, like say the Para Zero systems will qualify, and then the Phantoms with the Para Zero systems, or possibly the Indemnis, probably are category 2, and Inspire possibly category 2 with the Para Zero or an Indemnis system on it. So they all have to be tested, and what they have to do to qualify is they have to have a certificate of declaration of compliance. So the manufacturer has to supply a declaration of compliance before you can use those for ops over people. Those they can't even start submitting until 9 to 12 months after implementation. So this is not going to happen right away. You're going to see a lot of yahoos, and for those of us who are drone pros, are probably going to start getting those phone calls from FSDO. Would you please go talk to Bob, or you please go talk to Mary, because she's flying or he's flying his Inspire over a bunch of people. People won't understand the rules, but hopefully you guys will. All of this stuff will be published by the FAA and put out by those of us who are drone pros. Then you'll be able to start doing it. So it's not as confusing as it sounds. There are going to be some pretty hard timelines and some stuff to meet, and all the manufacturers do have to submit a declaration of compliance and has to be accepted by the FAA. Category 3 is also more for closed sets type stuff. Now that doesn't necessarily mean movies. It could also mean construction sites, because you have to have controlled access with notification of those on premise. So if you're on a movie set, obviously the director just gets on the bullhorn and says, "Hey guys, drone." If you're in a construction site, then you make arrangements the day before, and then every morning at a construction site, the PM has meetings with the subs, and the PM can then tell all the subs to tell all their people there's going to be a drone overhead. So that's going to be doable. So that's categories 1, 2, and 3. Category 1 can be, if you have a drone that works, you can start it the day of implementation, 60 days from whatever, 2 weeks from now. The other 2 will be a while to happen. And then the third one actually has a shorter timeline, but that's because all these guys already have, all the big boys already have their certificate, their worthiness certificates for the drones they're going to be using.
So it's at least a year out before I can put an Inspire above a concert.
At least.
Yeah.
At least.
And so
then in that situation, you damn well better be working with concert organizers too.
And so it also sounds like for category 2, it'll be at least a year out, and when it finally does become available, the drone will have to have some kind of a parachute on it.
More than likely. Somebody could be doing something with frangibles. I don't know. We'll see. And I was trying to see if I had the exact. I don't. I got so many papers around me, it's not even funny. So yeah, it's not going to be right away, except for those little Cinewups or possibly the Tello. And
right.
the key thing there is rotating parts that can lacerate skin. So somebody I saw online in a real brilliant statement said, "Well, I'll just file down my leading edges so they're not sharp." It's like, yeah, knock yourself out, brother, and I want to see that sucker fly. And then somebody else suggested breakaway props, and it's like, think about that for a minute, okay, and get back to me. So you're going to have some stupid people doing stupid things, but that's how life is. Okay, that's ops over people. Where the hell are my notes? Oh, here we are. Sorry. Did night ops, did ops over people. We kind of, covered Recurrent. And again, it's not a test, it's training. It's going to be free, no matter what Jason from Remote 101 says, Remote Pilot 101 says. And he is not going to be able to take it anywhere but FAA.gov. That is the only site you're going to be able to take it at. He might be confusing the upcoming hobby recreational pilot test that will be coming up pretty soon. Those will be able to take at different areas, but the FAA.safety.gov is the only place you're going to be able to take the 107 recurrent training. So I promise you that. What do my notes say? If you do take your currency training at FAA.safety or FAA.safety.gov, you start your 24-month clock over again. Okay, so it's that 24 calendar month clock starts when you take your training. So for me, I'm like 8 months into my third recurrent. No, my second recurrent. And so I can either just wait, but then I can't fly night ops, and I fly at night a lot, as many of you probably know. So I'm gonna have
quick
to take
question.
the currency. Sure.
Quick question. I did that little gap one for COVID. Like, are they just gonna is that gonna be good now?
You're over when you're over.
Only good
Sorry,
for
no extensions on the COVID gap. None.
Only good for
Sorry.
6 months.
Yeah, and it's not 6 calendar months. It's 6 months from the date of the test, if I remember correctly. So it's up to you. And this is what I tell everybody who says, I'm like 2 weeks short. It's like, okay, it's up to you to make that decision. I'm not going to make it for you. And I cannot tell you as a drone pro or a DAC member at this point that you don't worry about it. But I will tell people that the main issue is going to be your insurance. If you're flying illegally and you have an incident, you're hosed.
Already has that capability built into it.
A lot of the DJI stuff has the capability of most of the package.
Okay.
They've got their remote ID already in there. That is not the same thing as the FAA remote ID.
Okay.
Brendan is saying that they're working on that. He's one of the first people I talked to when I got this. Actually, well, I'm not going to say that because it's being recorded. Never mind. I talked to Brendan, and he was saying that, hey, you know what, we're trying. You know, there's some technical issues that have to be worked out still. So once that's done, I imagine a lot of the not only DJI, but I'm sure Autel's doing the same thing. They're going to be able to meet the remote ID via firmware update. That is just an educated guess. I don't have any confirmation from anybody.
Do you know what frequency remote ID gets transmitted?
It's all going to be either Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. It's all going to be out broadcast Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, and ASTM is putting their standards together right now. Kenji is actually on the F78, F38 group, whatever, ASTM group working on the remote ID standards. And so they had it ready to go, but they didn't know what was going to happen yet. So now that the rules are there, the FAA pushes the rules to ASTM. ASTM works on the rules to get it tweaked the way it needs to back to the FAA, and then it gets approved. The really nice thing there is the FAA has been working with ASTM the whole time.
Doesn't Bluetooth only have a range of like 60 feet?
30.
Now Bluetooth, I think it's 5.0. It has been tested out to 1.1 kilometers. Now that's perfect conditions line of sight. So they had the cohort out in May at, I think it was Quantico maybe, where a bunch of people got together and did a whole bunch of testing on all this RID stuff, the module stuff, and they got some pretty significant distances on Bluetooth. We can't think of it as like this Bluetooth. We can't think of it like that.
Right.
There are things that will have to happen. And there is no set radius yet. And since it's line of sight, the higher we are, the regular radius is. So if we're down lower, not as many people can see it. Now the broadcast and the module, which I'll go to in just a minute, those will be set up to where the information can be received on our cell phones. Got a text, you know, on any kind of smartphone, any kind of smart device. And one of the things in the standard remote ID is going to be pilot location, home base location that's visible to the public. So we're really working on that, and we won't get too deep into it here, but that is a huge issue. I made no qualms about it Sunday afternoon when I sent my FAA team an email saying this is a non-starter for a lot of people. And then once we had the meetings again, and then actually Kevin sent me back an email Monday afternoon and said, hey, one of the reasons we like you is because you're honest. You're not going to sugarcoat anything. So they are working on it. They're talking about putting UAS actually in the law, drone pilots or UAS as crew members. And so it will be the crew member of, we'll be crew members, and the FAA and the DOJ take that very seriously. And I've basically told them, okay, once that happens, you guys need to do it quickly, frequently, and publicly. You need to go after somebody and let them fry, basically. Let's just say something is in the works right now, which will become public very soon, which may prove this point. And I'll leave it at that for now.
So when you say home base location, that's the
That's
address
your
where the
controller.
drone is registered, or where you
No,
physically took
no,
off?
your
That's
controller.
RTH location, right?
Yeah, RTH location,
Okay.
controller, pilot location, whatever you want to call it. It's actually it's an issue. Now, with the module, you don't have to have because one of the things it has to broadcast as controller is in standard. It has to broadcast the GPS location and height of the controller, of the takeoff of the controller. Because the reason for that is, let's say someone's flying downtown and the GPS is at the top of the cash register building. Well, how many floors does that have? 72, whatever. So they're going to have an elevation as well for the controller. So that is something we need to work on with the FAA and the DOJ, and they know our feelings on that. That's the only issue really that the NPRM didn't address, or the difference between the NPRM and the final rule.
So are you thinking as far as the transmitter, that it may be Bluetooth or Wi-Fi?
It is either Bluetooth or Wi-Fi.
Will they be self-exclusive?
rule.
Or, I mean, or could it be either one of them?
It could be either or, because the language is or. It's not going to be both. That doesn't mean somebody won't make one that's both.
Right. Because I'm thinking
So-
like the existing birds, the existing DJI and Autel and all that, I would be really surprised if they're capable of broadcasting Bluetooth. That they have.
Yes, well, they're not. They'd have to be retrofitted. Yeah, so that's where the standard comes in, where they would just, their regular Wi-Fi now that they're using.
Right.
And
That's
there would have to
just
be
not a
some-
firmware upgrade. That's
Well,
sending
yeah,
it to
there's some stuff,
DJI.
like I said, there's some stuff that need to be worked out.
But that sounds like it
with
could be
that.
implemented a little easier because it's going to the controller and not to the drone, right?
Both, yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
but it's
that's
being
the technical
transmitted from
aspects
the
of that
drone.
aren't set yet. They aren't set that. So let's not get too hung up on that, because once ASTM comes out, then we can have the standards that we can work towards. So I don't want to get too caught up on that aspect of it yet.
Okay.
Excuse me. So the second class in is going to be the module that will be attached to your drone. Hang on a second. Can't mute that one. So I've been talking so long these last 10 days. The module will be something that you attach to your drone, and it will broadcast takeoff location only, because it's not going to be attached to your controller. And then along with everything else, it's going to have longitude, latitude, the altitude of the drone, and that type of stuff with it. So that will be that won't show pilot location. That will only show takeoff location, because there's nothing attached to the controller. That's for people who want to retrofit. That's for home builds. That's for people, that's for the FPV guys who just build stuff. Like, I got a bunch of stuff coming from Troy. I'm really excited about that here in the next couple weeks. That's what that's going to be for. It's going to be for the retrofit and for the home builds and stuff like that. So that's what the module's going to be.
Has Kenji published or sent any indication about what his solution will cost, just to give us an order of magnitude?
No, he doesn't yet. And thank you for bringing that up, by the way. That is, Kenji wants everybody. Anyway, he's not going to make a ton of money off this. I can promise you that. He says if he hopes he gets his investment back, or his wife's going to be really pissed off at him. The FAA is estimating these modules will cost $50. I think they're grossly overestimating this. They're not including the market-driven pricing. I'm guessing 25-ish, and it would not surprise me if some sub $20 broadcast modules are out there, mainly because they're small. They are going to have GPS on it for the retrofits that don't have GPS. So you'll have some that'll be cheaper, like if you want to retrofit a drone, one of the DJIs that can't be firmware upgraded. They already have GPS, so all you have to do is worry about getting that data and then transferring it to the broadcast. So there'll be something in there with that.
Sounds like I want to get the cheapest one possible.
You do.
So it's very ineffective.
You know what?
Range of 10 feet.
There will be ranges, but yeah, you're right. You just want to get the cheapest one. Now, for the home builds and for the hobbyists, for the recreational folks, who will still be allowed to have one registration number to put on all their drones. That was another win for recreation. You can take your module and move it from drone to drone to drone to drone to drone. 107 folks are not going to be allowed to do that. If you've got your drone registered under 107 and you have a retrofit, you're going to have its own module, which I'm really upset about, but it is what it is with the FAA.
Yeah, it's just the cost of doing business. It's not a big deal.
It is just a cost. That's a good way to look at it. Cost of doing business. But the big thing was that the hobbyists didn't want to have to register every single one of their drones. And you've got people like John McBride that have 150 different RC craft. That's just cost prohibitive. So he was pretty happy about that. I'll check chat here in just a minute, folks. Actually, now I'll do it real quick. What are you guys talking about? Oh, remote ID. Oh, somebody already answered that. Oh, Vic Moss groupie.
So,
thanks, Will.
One question is that.
Yeah.
What's this going to do? Is it going to affect Lance approval at all? Now that we have a remote ID on the drone, would we then be able to have like ongoing Lance approval going into various different airspace classes, or is it just business as usual? We just now have the remote ID on your drone.
Exactly. Lance and remote ID are not going to be tied together. Totally two different things. So, but one of the things that didn't make it from the NPRM, which Kitty Hawk and a few others suggested, was Notify and Fly, which is going to be an RID type Lance system. That didn't make it. So there are people that are going to probably be working on that, and then we can see if we can get that added to the rule at a future date, and maybe even before then, because like I said, we have 32 months from publication. So maybe we can do it.
And if we have to have one remote ID per drone, then it's, just makes sense.
I know it makes sense, but you are talking about the FAA rules. Okay.
So you're gonna have to get like 6 of them.
To be fair to the FAA, the reason pilot location is in standard remote ID is because none of the, like DHS, the FBI, and the DOJ would not sign off on the rule unless it was there. And whatever DHS wants, the 900-pound gorilla in the room, DHS gets.
Yep.
So
I don't have a problem with pilot location.
I don't normally because of what I carry, but and I don't carry a gun. I carry bear spray. I do have a weapon in my car these days, but that's for a different reason. I carry bear spray with me if I'm any comfortable at all. And actually, it's gel. It's not spray. So if you're gonna do something, carry bear gel, because gel sticks and it goes a lot further.
It's not affected by wind as much either.
It's not. I was
going to say, I think now all we need is a Trump flag, but I don't want to get into that too much.
We're not going there. Okay. Okay, so remote ID. We talked about standard. The module is going to be the same thing pretty much, except you're not going to have pilot location. Now, the other thing about remote ID standard, so the built-in stuff from the manufacturers, is it's going to be on from liftoff until shut down, not just landing. The other thing is, if you've got a standard remote ID, so it's internal, it's built into the system by the manufacturer, it will have to go through a startup sequence and a notification sequence that remote ID is working, or the drone will not be able to lift off. That's a little frustrating because that's just another point of failure.
Yep. It's hard enough to get a DJI drone to take off anyways.
At times, definitely. The module will also still have the feature that it will go through a checkup or go through a self-test every time you fire up. But if it fails the self-test, then it's up to you on whether or not you're going to be allowed to, you can allow yourself to fly. So they're kind of giving us, the adults say, hey, you know what? Yeah, this is the rule. You have to decide if you want to follow it. For the remote ID standard, you don't have the choice not to follow it. All of these remote ID modules and the remote ID standard have to be tamper resistant. That means you cannot turn it off.
I give it 2
easily.
weeks before a hacker figures out how to get around that.
Oh, are you kidding? It's not going to be that. You know, it's going to be a bunch of 6th graders on recess who have library duty or something are going to figure it out. But again, that's the adult side. It's like, okay, here's the rules. You're not supposed to do that. Don't do it. Will people do it? Absolutely, 100%. You know, stupid people have drones too. So, you know, the legal side says you have to do it, and we'll just leave it at that. The other third part is if you do have a drone that is not FRIA, that is not remote ID capable, you don't want to do it, you know, any of that stuff. I'm plugging in my computer. Here we go. Then you have to fly out one of those FRIAs. It's FAA. It's the FAA. I just said it. Somebody else. FAA remote. Shoot. Did everybody freeze? No.
Nope.
FRIA is FAA recognized identification area. There we go. I knew it'd come to me if I stumbled along fast enough. So those will be like the AMA fields, things like that. Schools. I work with CCIC at Cherry Creek, and they actually have set themselves up a net because they're right by CAPA, and CAPA won't let them fly without one. So those FRIAs will be, you'll have to have, we won't get too much into the FRIAs, but you know, you'll be able to renew it every 48 months instead of 24 months, which was a big victory. The NPRM said if you don't apply within 12 months of implementation, too bad, you can never have a FRIA. They did away with that, so you can apply for FRIAs from now till the cows come home, if you have cows. So that was nice, an aspect of it. And they will have geographic boundaries. So that's a little bit of an issue with some of the big birds out there. The big scale RC, the turbines, that kind of stuff. There's going to be some need. I'll get to that chat here in just a minute. There's going to be some need for them to have an exclusion, and there is a built-in exclusion process, or there will be a fairly easily built-in exclusion process for remote ID. So they know that there's going to be things that can't fly with remote ID, can't fly within a FRIA. So that's going to be a process. The other thing is law enforcement. They have something called the SGI right now, which they can get exclusions, waivers, that kind of stuff very quickly, and they're going to be doing the same thing for law enforcement, that kind of thing. Like a SWAT, you know, you don't want SWAT to show up with an RID compliant drone and have the guy inside the house they're surrounding watching the drone. I mean, duh. So they understand that there's going to be a process. It is not ready yet. The FRIAs we just mentioned, again, it's going to be fairly easy, but the geographic boundaries will be an issue. Odysseus, I'm not even going to try Odysseus Prime. If these modules were relatively short range, who is receiving the data broadcast? Oh, good idea. A good question, actually. I probably didn't cover that very well. It'll be picked up by anybody who has a smartphone. So there'll either be an app or a dongle or something that will be there. You're not going to be required to have any kind of piggyback system that extends the range. So that's not going to be an issue. If you're 400 feet in the air, you might have 700-800 foot radius or 700-800 yard radius that people can pick you up from. So that's not going to be that bad. If you're down 50 feet above the treetops, it's probably going to be just a few meters. You know, everything has to be line of sight. The only issue would be if you're in a town that's a smart town, and they're not that many, but obviously they'll get more. They may have equipment they can pick that up and record it. So that might be an issue at a later date.
So anyone,
some
with
drone
a
hating
phone
Yahoo
can
can run around with the smartphone and try to find
They
dronies.
can, they can, but since we have line of sight anyway, it's kind of, it's not as bad as I first thought it was. Is, you know, without the network aspect of it, somebody can't get on their internet and find where you can look these things up and go around and find stuff. Now, it's still an issue. It is still an issue, absolutely. But no, it's not going to be a widespread issue because you're not going to have quite the distance. You're going to be very limited geographically as to who can find your drone. I still advise carrying bear gel. Or worse, or other lethal or non-lethal. A Tello without prop guard weighs 80 grams. rock and roll. How about with prop guard? With prop guard. Do you have one of those, Joe?
You know, when I've gotten my drones, I take the prop guards like that tag that comes on your pillow, or your mattress. Do not remove. Oh yeah, yeah. My prop.
Me too.
I don't know. I would guess a Tello with prop guards got to be about 100 grams, maybe 100.
It can't be much. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I turn my background off for a minute, so you can see a little better. Yeah. So this is what I was trying to show you. This is a Beta FPV 95X, and I put a little naked GoPro on it. That's under 250 grams. Now for commercial work, you're going to have it remote ID. The 250 gram exclusion is only for recreational. So you're going to have remote ID on that sucker.
Remote, regardless of size, right?
The best way to look at it is if you have to register it, it needs remote ID.
Okay, good point.
Do you think that cities will then create ordinances or permits since they will now be able to see who? You know what? That's one of the fears was with the network system, is that now these cities and towns can say, hey, I'm going to charge you a landing fee. But they're not going to have really any way to do it unless they're one of the smart cities, in which case they're just going to piss people off. I would be amazed if the cities actually do that now with this remote ID, with the broadcast system instead of the network system. I mean, is it possible? Anything's possible. You know, if the city could put listening devices up and listen for our drones, and then send out a city inspector and say, I want to see your license for ground use stuff. But I just don't think I don't think they're going to do that. I really don't think.
Well, how about the opposite? How about like places like Boulder, or, you know, that have a very restricted airspace? Have there been any discussion about opening that up now that they're able to identify sources?
No, I hadn't, but that's, you know, I haven't had those discussions. They're not ready yet. But Boulder itself does not have restricted airspace. They have restricted parks. You can't fly from the parks in open space, but the airspace is wide open. They're all entirely G airspace in Boulder.
Huh. Yeah, it's Boulder open space. That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, you can't fly from open space. And in theory, you're not supposed to fly over it, but what they do is say you can't disturb wildlife.
Not without a permit.
Not without a permit.
Yeah.
And that is literally a ground use permit, so you're allowed to do that. The only metro area government entity that I know of that tries to control over is actually Jefferson County open space. I've had that discussion with a couple of their lawyers more than once, and they're adamant about it. So I was actually this summer going to let them know when and where I'm flying and have them ticket me. And that obviously with COVID and everything went away. But one of these days, when we get back, probably this summer, we're going to get back, and I'm gonna take that to court because they just won't listen to me. It's like, you know, sorry, we can sit down and meet and talk about this, or we can go to a judge. Your choice. And it won't cost me anything. So
how is the FAA going to enforce remote ID, and what are the penalties if a pilot chooses not to have a remote ID equipped drone once these laws are into effect?
Penalty is coffee with Vic or Joe.
No, it's not coffee with Vic or Joe.
It's breakfast.
6 a.m. Yeah.
3 hots and a cot. No.
I just give him my bar tab.
Is you know, it's going to be an educational. It's just like the FAA always says: educate, force to educate, remediate. So it's going to be that, you know, they're going to put out a push. They're going to say this, that, the other. You know, with the new stuff, they're going to have to anyway, because 18 months from now, every 18 months from implementation, every drone sold in the United States will have to be RID compliant, if it's over 250 grams, obviously. And so they're going to rely, when it comes down to the actual enforcement aspect of it too, they're going to rely on boots on the ground, local police officers, and they know that there's going to be training involved with that. And my theory on that is, and it's a theory, but it's, you know, it's an educated theory, is that similar to what happens with DUI patrols, you know, if you get pulled over or canine patrols, you're going to have a few certain people on every shift that are specifically K9, specifically DUI, DWI, whatever. And odds are they're going to have some fairly specifically trained officers on each shift that will either go to or show up after a drone incident. And so there'll be the rules they need to follow. You're going to have LEAP, which is a law enforcement assistance program. Those officers are going to be really key in all that. Joe and I are really going to be key in educating the cops on what they can and cannot do. So they're really going to rely heavily on the drone pros. We're getting more and more. I think we're up to almost 200 now. Drone pros across the country. And Joe, you'll actually be getting an email from the drone pros. We're going to have, I think, January 28th. I'm putting on a training webinar for drone pros when it comes to the new rules. So that'll be fun.
It'll be a review for you, Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Well, here's your review. Just to make sure that everybody understands, you know, everybody who needs to educate the other people know how to educate and know what's going on. I'm actually in law enforcement and like to learn more. Hey, hit me up, John Fly Eagle. I'm sorry, I'm assuming your name's John. Is about law enforcement? No, that's fine. That's fine. Hook me up. Hit me up. Don't hook me up. I'm married. Hit me up with. I've had a very long day. I'm sorry, guys. I'm drinking ginger ale. There's no alcohol involved.
There's a problem right there, right,
there
Armando? That's the problem.
Vic at dspalliance.org or just call me. Can you take notes? Yeah, I'm gonna
think about this for a second. So anyone that's got a smartphone can get information about a drone that they see flying around.
Right.
Okay. And if you're dealing with a person who is not educated about the laws, let's say someone's doing a roof inspection and, you know, they're flying overhead on a roof. So they heard about this really cool app you can download. They download it and they find out that, oh, Joe Morales was flying a drone
again
over this house.
Damn you, Joe.
And so now they call the cops. And so the cops are first they're going to say, like, really?
Yeah, pretty much.
And so then they're going to come out maybe and have a little fireside chat with Joe.
Right.
And Joe's going to say, well, I was flying my drone over a roof, doing a roof inspection. So fine. Next day later, guess what? They get another phone call because he's doing another roof inspection. And you multiply this by 100 or 1,000. Pretty soon the cops are going to say, this isn't worth my time.
Yeah, they already say that.
I mean, cops have much better things to do than to deal with this.
And they do have better things to do, and they're going to realize that. And John, feel free to pipe in if you want. There's a drone flying in my backyard at night looking in my windows. That's when they're going to call. That's when they're going to be an issue. A drone crash, you know, there's somebody flying near a school. Let's say that. Whenever I'm flying near a school, and I suggest this to everybody, I go to the office and say, hey, it's me. This is what I'm doing. When I'm done, I say, I'm done. If anybody else reports a drone now, it's not me. So call the cops. It's.
Can I go ahead and pipe in on that?
What?
Can I go ahead and add that law enforcement piece in there?
Yeah, go for it. You're cracking up a little bit. Well, not cracking up. You're breaking up a little bit. I don't know. Maybe you are cracking up too. I am, but you're breaking up a little bit. So go for it, though.
So, I mean, my thought is, I'm in law enforcement, have been for 25 years, and we've watched the calls for service seem to increase, but they haven't been drastic. I think, you know, I mean, what I think law enforcement's missing is the education piece on this. As far as our dispatch and response policies, I can't think of anything about this drone related. And I think that we start getting a whole abundance of calls regardless of what it is. We take a look at it, and that's how policies created. So Vic, I'd like to talk to you more about the education that you provide.
Oh, I'd love to talk to you about it. Yeah, you're breaking up pretty bad, so it's kind of hard. But I'd love to talk to you about how your force handles it, if nothing else, because I can then relay that stuff. One of the really great things about my infamous Denver Broncos Monday Night Football photograph is that I got to meet the local FBI guy. that deals with drone stuff as well. So I'm going to I'm going to be reaching out to him as well and getting his input on that. We had coffee. He's a great guy. We've ended up kind of being friendly. But we had coffee when the NPRM came out, and I wanted to get his input on that. And now that we actually have the rule out, I'm going to do the same thing and get his input on that once we actually can, or at least have a conversation with him. But yeah, John, be in touch with me. I'd love to hear a little bit more. I caught about 3 out of every 4 words you said. So I think I got a little bit of the gist of what you're talking about, but give me a call, either shoot me an email or send me or call me or text me or whatever. That's my cell phone. And definitely would like to get together and talk with you about it. Get you some of the LEAP cards too that you can pass out in your district.
So
yeah, that'd be great. I'll send you I'll text you here when this is over. I'll text you my cell number as well together.
Cool, thanks.
So I have another question around this enforcement. So if you're flying without remote ID after the rule's gone into effect, are you breaking, you're obviously not breaking like a Colorado law or a city law. You're violating an FAA rule.
Statute, right.
Statute, okay. So the local authorities are not gonna have any authority, or are they, to write you a summons?
No, not to write you a summons, but to get all your information and get it to FSDO as it's written now. Now, there might be some mirrored laws that are going to be coming out, because the FAA right now kind of frowns on the whole state mirrored laws with federal law, or local mirrored laws with federal law. There are a few cities that do that. They're not supposed to. But they are probably going to be relaxing that to a point to where, let's say Lakewood here says, we're going to make a law that says if you break FAA law or FAA statute, it's also a city statute. So that would give them some enforcement powers. There's some legal aspects of that have to be worked out. There might be some double jeopardy questions come out of that. But when you start mixing state and federal law, it gets a little goofy.
Yeah, I mean,
basically they're going to
seems weird. I mean, I can just see once word gets out that, oh, you can download this app. Every time someone sees a drone, every time a drone is up in the air, there's enough crazy people out there that are going to call the police or call whoever. And even if the drone is flying perfectly legal, and after a point in time, it's going to be like crying wolf.
It very well could be, and that's where the education side of it comes in.
Well, who are you going to be educating? The general public? Good luck with that.
Yeah, yes, the FAA will be educating the general public. Myself, Joe, and the LEAP officer is going to be educating the police departments and that type of stuff. There's going to be some education involved, and it will likely cause some issues right at first. But you look at cell phones. I mean, cell phones are a good example. When cell phones first came out, if you were in a locker room, like a public locker room, you had to leave your cell phone with the attendant. You couldn't even take it into the locker room, because they're afraid you're gonna take pictures. Of Uncle Bob's naked butt. But so I see where you're going with that, and I
well, because they quit doing it because it was unenforceable.
Pardon?
They quit doing it because it was unenforceable.
Yeah, and
the liability of holding on to $1,000 cell phone or more and losing it and all that. I mean, and people.
It was part of that, and part of people just, people are afraid of what they don't know of. We're lucky in that drones have been around for 7 years now, so it's not that big a deal anymore. If you spend any time on some of the, like nextdoor.com or whatever, you'll know that there's less and less. Oh, somebody's flying my drone. It's more like, hey, somebody's flying my drone, or someone's flying a drone. Cool. So the tide is turning in that, but that doesn't mean there won't be issues like you described.
Vic, one question. You mentioned that that there's, I don't know if it's in the works or already has been, apps that would track the RID. Is that live data, or is that any data? So for instance, if I had this tracking app and I left it at my house, would I be able to tell anytime within an 8-hour period of, hey, I had 3 drones go over my house in the 8-hour period?
Maybe. It's a good question. I haven't heard that one before. That's
okay.
That's going on my list. I would imagine it's up to the individual app.
Well, since it's not being networked, once the drone is off, has landed, that information is gone.
It might keep a history. That's all. You know,
That's exactly it. Like there's a cache history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like your Ring doorbell keeps a history of people that could walk by your front door or whatever. You know, yeah. So I would imagine an app could probably do that. I don't know why. There's nothing in the wording that I saw that either requires it or forbids it. So,
well, just also curiosity, you know, like we were talking about law enforcement and such. So, you know, law enforcement, I don't know if that data is just transmitted live or if it's like, hey, we saw a record that you came very close to this school on such and such a date and such a time via this, you know, app that tracked your drone over the course of 8 hours. So I'm just curious.
If you're close enough, and if the app has a history, absolutely. But
that's the question: is what is the residual presence?
There's no residual presence. It's live, and when you turn it off, it's off. But if somebody has an app, like let's say a school develops an app and they've got something that does that, or a prison or whatever, you're not going to get a visit by somebody because nothing except the remote ID information is going to be broadcast. It's not going to be anybody. It's not going to be Joe's name. It's not going to be Joe's address. It's not even going to be the FAA, your FAA registration number. It's going to be remote ID number. So if somebody has that and needs to get in touch with whoever the pilot was, and it even could be good, like, hey, there was somebody flying around. There was an accident over here at Wadsworth and Alameda. We saw you flying around about that time. Do you have, by any chance, have any information? You can't necessarily. It's not necessarily going to be bad. But they're going to have to show just cause to the FAA in order to get access to the FAA registration records. There's not going to be any personal information broadcast. I did not make that clear. So sorry on my part. It's not going to have any personal information, your pilot license, your name, your phone number. None of that stuff's going to be broadcast. It's all going to strictly be
just the
remote ID.
Okay.
Yep. Remote ID and location. That's it.
So,
like a license
how do they
plate,
get that
basically.
information? Is that going to be through a court order, or is it going to be?
It would probably be some kind of official. I don't know if it has to be a court order or not, so they'll get that. But there's going to have to be some kind of official request, and that request is going to have to be reviewed. It's not just going to be, somebody showing up with like John shows up with his badge and say, I saw this and I want to know who it is. That's not how it's going to work.
It was Joe. That's all I know.
His name was Joe.
It's Joe.
So
it was Joe. He works on helicopters. Go ahead, whoever that is. Sorry.
Sorry, it's Elaine. So it sounds like the app that's going to be, that will be able to identify that your RID at some point with the FAA or somewhere is going to have to store that data of what RID was at what location at what time, so that they could go back and
no, that will not be stored, and that's one of the benefits of not having the networked RID. That was one of the big issues with networked RID is you're going to have, that's what DHS wanted was a glance, a one-time glance at everybody in the sky at the same time with drones. The only way it will be stored is, like I said, is with, or like we were talking about, is with, if somebody develops an app that has a history and you have the app on, that's the only way it's going to be stored. It's not going to have any kind of networking capabilities or anything like that. So somebody can't go online at some other date and say, well, I saw a drone, I wonder who it was, because the event is over and that data is no longer being transmitted. And it's not floating around anywhere. It's not on the web. At worst case scenario, it'll be somebody's app on their phone if they left their phone on or whatever, and they have that app on. And then they got to find out who has it. So that's not going to be a worry at all. There's not going to be any forensic ability.
That's very interesting from an enforcement standpoint.
Oh yeah, it's going to be the enforcement's going to be happening then real time.
So let's say you take an app.
So if it can't happen, if enforcement can't happen real time, then there's pretty much nothing to worry about.
Pretty much. Now, again, like I said, if you've got a smart city out there that sets up somehow to do that, or if somebody makes a report and says, I've got the history of this flight on my phone and here's the RID number, then it can happen. But once you shut your drone down, boom, nothing else is happening. So there's no networking, no nothing. It's just going to be happenstance or intentional.
Let's take an app like Waze, which is on millions and millions of cell phones when people are.
You're going to have to explain to me what that is.
That's
that mapping one, right?
Yeah, it's a thing that tells you. Sorry. It's a mapping program. It tells you where there's traffic jams and things like that. And the way it works is, the more people that have this on their cell phone, they're all talking to each other, they're talking to a central server.
Mhm.
It would not be a stretch for Waze to say, well, since we're broadcasting anyway, let's be sniffing out for drones.
Yeah,
And
possible.
they could basically build a big grid of all the drones that that these smartphones see.
They could,
Yeah,
but to what
basically
end?
kind of crowdsource it
But to what end? Why?
Because
Other
they
than the fact
can.
that they could.
because they can.
They
That
can.
sounds,
Yeah, exactly.
that
Why
sounds a
did
lot
you
like
climb that
something
mountain?
Google-
Well, because I can.
Well, I mean, maybe they
Um,
could sell it to law enforcement then, or maybe they could. I
But you
mean,
know,
Yeah, I
data
could
is
see Google.
valuable.
data is valuable.
Data is very
I
valuable.
just don't see this aspect of it, and I see where you're coming from. I don't see this aspect of the remote ID system being that valuable, unless
I
you're
don't
a thief
know.
and you want to figure out where everybody's flying, you know, or if you want to find out what your competition is doing. Hey, Frederick, you leaving?
Scared.
So
Yeah, no.
I understand Google has raised some privacy concerns over this remote ID.
It's because they're pissed.
Well, I'm sure they
They're
are.
pissed they didn't get network ID. The big telecom companies and Google and Alphabet and all those guys, I think it's the same company. Anyway, all those
Yes.
guys,
It's Google's parent.
they wanted network ID so they know where all the drones are. They didn't get it. So they're pissed. So they're going to do things like privacy. It's like, wait, let's dissect that a minute. They're saying that the module or the broadcast is going to be a privacy issue, but it's limited to this thing. If we're all networked, anybody with the right computer skills can find us anywhere. So their privacy argument holds zero water. Is that a Moscow Mule? Anyway, it's their privacy argument holds no water, because
Well, they
it's
want to
actually
monetize
more
it.
private the way we're going to do it with broadcast rather than with internet. It's much
they
more
just-
private.
They want to monetize that data point.
They want to monetize it, and to their defense, they also want to know where the drones are so they don't crash into them. But they can do the same thing with remote ID. Is they can put a receiver on their drones and have it interact with their flight systems. Remote ID is the first step to UTM, to unmanned traffic management. I mean, that's the
Right.
first step. It has to happen before UTM is ever even a dream. So this is the first step. But no, Google's pissed. Google's pissed. Amazon's pissed. AT&T's pissed.
So that's a good point,
Everybody's
Vic. So,
pissed, all the
I mean,
telecom people.
one question too. I mean, is there any plans for like to see other remote IDs on your controller?
No. Well, could it happen? Absolutely, because that might be a safety thing as well.
Proximity
If you've got
alerts.
somebody flying, like
Yeah,
AirSense
yeah.
with DJI. Yeah, it could happen. I think it would be a bad idea in certain situations.
Like
If I'm out
ADSB.
flying around, I'd kind of like to know where
Yep.
somebody else is.
Yeah, exactly.
That was my initial thought when I read about it. I was like, oh, great. I'll be able to know if somebody else is nearby that I might not see.
It's not a bad thing. Will everybody have it? Who knows? It'll be a separate piece of equipment you have to use. Like I don't fly with my phone, so it would have to be something on my phone, and maybe I have it set up to do an alert or something.
Well,
So
it seems like DJI could add that to their app very
Absolutely.
easily.
it's just a matter of doing it. But yeah, they just have to get the data into it and then make it a little alert, like their AirSense does now on the Matic Air 2, I think, and what's the other one it does it with? Anyway, anything over 250 grams coming out now from DJI will have AirSense on it.
So are manned aircraft going to have, I mean, it seems to me, as a private pilot, it would be very good information for me to know if there's a drone flying around me.
It's not gonna, unless they have their app out there and they've got their phone out there with their app on and they're within range. It's not going to be, ADSB is actually specifically forbidden in
Right.
in the wording, except during, there might be some waivers, BVLOS and stuff like that require it, but it's not designed for manned aircraft to have access to that data readily, because it's not their responsibility to watch out for us. It's our responsibility to watch out for them.
But if they're really concerned about safety, I'm a pilot, I'm not active anymore, but it would really be nice if I'm flying, doing touch and goes at an airport, if I know that there's a drone in the vicinity.
Well,
mean, that's the whole thing about
not
FAA
what
being
remote
concerned
ID is
about
for.
safety.
Out of control drone.
Yeah, that's not what remote ID is for. In the safety aspect of it, again, it falls back to us as operators or remote pilots that we need to see and avoid, or sense and avoid if it's if it's BB loss. So it's not something that the FAA is really looking into integrating it into manned aviation. One, it's just because of the distances involved. Now, if I've got a waiver to fly 1,200, 1,500 feet over something, there may be some different things that I have to do. Maybe I do have to have a drone with ADS-B out. I'm definitely going to have to do NOTAMs and stuff. But
so if it's not for safety,
it is for safety, but not for manned
usually when
aviation.
things are put into effect, that there's a reason. So, or a
Mhm.
problem. What problem does this remote ID solve?
It solves a problem of fulfilling a congressional mandate, basically, at this point. The safety aspect comes into, like I mentioned, unmanned traffic management. Future, it's not going to be that big of a safety issue now. It's just laying the groundwork for future safety stuff. And the aspect of, the clueless and the careless and the criminal. Criminal, obviously, you're probably not going to be broadcasting our ID by definition, they're criminal. But the clueless and the careless, or the stupid criminal, that's where the safety aspect's going to come in. If somebody sees somebody doing something stupid, find them, education can take place. The other thing too is in controlled airspace, or let's use the Monday Night Football thing again. They had 2 cops, the NFL security, the FBI, and Mile High Stadium security out there with me as I was flying. If that was a waste, that was a waste of resources right there that night, and because they all showed up. If I had remote ID, which I did actually, because their aeroscope picked it up and they knew who I was. But there's 3 or 4 people flying around Monday Night Football game. I've got remote ID. I'm on their white list. They see it. It pops up. The alarm goes off on whatever. Okay, that's Vic. He's fine. Pops up. The alarm goes off. It's like, we don't know who that is. And they go and arrest Armando. So they can
again.
It's a it's
pick on the brown guy,
resources. Huh? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Ouch, dude. So and same thing with my zero grid flights at DIA. If they've got something set up, then they know it's me, and if they say we don't know who that is, then their asset resources are going to be much better used.
Well, it sounds like a whole lot of effort.
Huge issue with that, but
it's like a whole
the
lot of
safety
effort
aspect of it.
and money being spent on fixing a problem that doesn't really exist.
It does exist to
and
a
it's
point.
not really affecting safety.
It's going to prevent other problems from existing in the future. Like I said, the first step of UTM is RID. So it is what it is. It's here. We can gripe about it, or we can learn how to deal with it.
It just seems like a huge waste of effort and money.
David, are you unfamiliar with our federal government?
I
mean, what else are they gonna do?
They're bored, man. They're just all the other ways to make money. They've just
or the FAA is being driven by a lot of this. But at the end of the day, if you're not happy, we're not happy.
No, you're not happy until we're not happy until you're not happy.
You're not happy. Or
no. I now understand. I guess I understand why it's being done. Not for safety, but to fill a congressional mandate.
Safety is the ultimate reason. Is it the driving reason right now? No. No, it is not. With few exceptions that are in the minority.
Right.
So it's the infant stages of what we do for a living or what we do for fun, and what other big names are going to be doing soon enough. It's laying the groundwork for the airspace highway. I don't know a better way to put it.
Airspace management.
Have they announced what the penalty is, though? Have they announced what the penalty is if you fly?
No, they haven't yet. It might be in there, but I haven't read it. Because again, the FAA is all about education first.
Right.
If you've done something where you get a fine, you've done something stupid like fly through the streets of wherever that guy was, Mikey, and ignore the FAA
Philadelphia.
and reach out to you. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's right, Philly Flyer or whatever his name is. You know,
Yeah.
$184,000 threat later, he
Yep.
finally pulls his head out of his butt and listens to the FAA.
Right.
You know,
No,
that was
he
their
got fair
last
warning,
resort.
that's for sure.
That
What
was
I
their
understand.
last resort.
Yeah.
And people like Ken
Huh.
Dono were like, dude, you got to quit doing this. And he kept doing it. So play stupid games, you win stupid prizes.
So another quick question, Vic, is was there a timeline mentioned about when you'd have to have an RID from said publication?
Yes. Sorry. I thought I covered that. I might not have. I was bouncing around all over the place.
30 months.
Yeah,
From implementation, you have 30 months. On the
30
sheet
months,
in the
okay.
lot, 30 months plus 60 days. That's because that's the date of publication. I'm basing everything off the date of implementation. It's
Okay.
just going to be 30 months for consumers to comply, 18 months for manufacturers to comply. So 18 months from the date from implementation, you will not be able to buy a non-RID compliant drone. And odds are a lot sooner than that because nobody's going to want a bunch of drones sitting around that they're going to have to retrofit.
Yeah.
I would imagine once ASTM standards are there, and I know there's other standards agency, but ASTM is going to be the standard agency. It's a given. But once it's there, I guarantee the manufacturers are ready. They just have to get the standards. They're going to tweak a little bit. And I have a sneaky suspicion, and I have no inside information. That's why the Mavic 3 has been delayed.
I've been wondering. It's supposed to have been out a while ago.
That's not DJI. That's not anybody. I don't have any inside information from Brendan. It's just a sneaky suspicion in the back of my head. That's why the Mavic 3 is being pushed.
Yep.
And
so so they're expecting this publication. Well, I mean, any day now. Like, they've had it for 10 days, so 30 months from, let's say, next week.
The second Tuesday of next week.
Yeah, I think middle of the month is a very respectful, a very good guess. As long as Washington D.C. doesn't burn down again. We were actually trying to have our live Q&A with Greg when all that crap was going on in DC, and everybody broke the internet. We actually had to reschedule it because the internet flat broke. All the live streaming on YouTube, and so everything was live streaming YouTube from what we were doing, and all of a sudden we were just shut down. It was weird. So, but anyway, hopefully that doesn't happen Monday. What other questions do I have?
I'm good, Vic. I really appreciate the info and
Vic,
just understanding some of the stuff. This has been great.
This was excellent, and it was great to see all the guys. The band is almost back together.
And gals. There's a couple gals now.
And gals, absolutely.
And we've got to get together and fly and drink beer in that order.
Yes, and while we're on that subject, I'm going to tentatively look for February, as we have the restaurants are opening up a little bit, even though the COVID numbers are still all over the place. But I'm going to tentatively try to put something together for the end of February to get the band back
February
together.
27th.
Yeah, the last Tuesday of the month. Yeah.
Oh darn.
So
something to maybe
wait a minute.
Joe, something to maybe consider for that is,
darn.
During this time, we might have to try to do maybe like a Saturday afternoon so we can be outside.
That's an idea as well. Yeah.
Or even the Zoom call again.
Lakewood. Joe, let's talk to Lakewood and see if we can get Addenbrook.
Yeah,
that'd be cool if we can get some at Addenbrook.
Oh, I'm sure with the way they are right now, and that one little swatch that we've spoken about there. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Worst case,
I think anybody will be happy if you bring a group of people in.
Yeah. Let's kick that around, and also consider too the actual meetup at an establishment.
Mm-hmm.
And just so you all know, I've spoken to a few of you. February 5th is my last day at work.
5th now? Awesome! Congratulations.
February 5th.
You pulled the trigger. Nice.
Yep.
Good for you, buddy.
Yeah. So I'm retiring, but I'm not. I'm retiring, but I'm not. I'm going to get more active in this, as those of you who know me, the the job that I took on while I was semi-retired consumed me up quite a bit. And then this COVID thing kicked in and it really took me away from a lot of the things I love. So luckily, thank God, I was able to pull the plug, get out early. And I got, as of tomorrow, 21 working days left. So
Not that you're counting.
Not that you're
not that
Joe,
I'm
are you
counting.
thanking COVID?
Yeah. So with that said, hope to devote more time to this. And yeah, let's get the band back together and get these meetups going again, and we'll have some fun out there. So
Definitely. I'm going to put a plug into for the DSPA Alliance, the Drone Service Provider Alliance. That's, for those of you who don't know, dspalliance.org is something Kenji and I put together this summer. Just basically in case one of us got on the DAC, to cover the expenses, because everybody else on the DAC is paid to be there and has their expenses covered by their company or by their organization. We aren't. So when we got notice Tuesday that we're both on the DAC, we all of a sudden went, oh crap, now we definitely need to get members to join us. We also have a donation button there. Kenji and I are not taking a salary on this. This is strictly to cover our expenses traveling to and from DAC or ASTM. The first DAC meeting is actually in February and it's virtual. That's not going to be that big a deal. But once they can start having those things together, we're definitely going to need some cash. So it's not all out of our pocket. Or if it's in like Washington, DC, if anybody has a friend there who has a nice big comfy couch, we're not above couch surfing. You know, we're trying to do this just to cover our expenses to get.
Well, Vic, your efforts in this are always appreciated, and I got to share this with the group. The other night, I was looking at the advisory committee. I was looking at the FAA page, where I actually went on the FAA website, and it showed all the members. And to see Vic Moss's name on there, I only see people on FAA websites either for getting an award or getting violated. So when I saw Vic's name on there, I'm like, oh no, that's very cool. So congrats, Vic.
Double whammy.
We're honored. We are.
Yeah.
Kenji and I are really honored.
So
and we're at not just for the drone service providers, but we're there for hobbyists. And I'll even be working with AMA as much as I like to punch most of their leadership in the throat. And also Dave Messina from the FPV Freedom Coalition is actually, if you promise not to put this out before next week, is going to be joining our advisory board. Stop recording. Now, Dave Messina is going to be joining our advisory board on DSPA, as is a few other people. That's all I'll mention. People you all know. Yeah, because we want transparency at the DSPA. That's one of our big things is, hey, you know what? You're trusting us with your resources. We want to show you where they're going.
Very cool.
fair enough.
I had to put the plug in. Sorry.
30-second commercial. It was all good.
There you go. Yep.
Gotta do what you gotta do.
That's right. So anybody else have any more questions?
Well, folks, I'm going to bail here. Vic, thank you much.
Thank you.
And everyone,
everybody.
both familiar faces and our new folks, appreciate your participation. Hope to see you around, and feel free to hit up us up anytime for anything, you know, advice, questions, whatever. This is a great group, and welcome all newcomers, and it's great to see the old faces out there. So
It's good
Really
to see
glad
everyone
see
up, right?
everybody. It's been too long.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks for putting this together, Joe. Thank you.
Yeah.
no, and
Joe.
Dave,
Joe,
And
Dave.
thanks, David. This is
Vic.
David's account.
Yeah,
so
I
thank
see
you,
that.
David.
Okay. Thanks. Dave. Yeah.
I'm retired now. I need money. Yeah, need that.
Come on,
Yeah,
everybody,
it's
put
got
it
the-
in.
It's got the tin can.
Yeah, there you go.
I'll
There
take
you
that,
go.
Armando.
Here's my can.
There
There
you go.
Here you go. I don't have
All right,
anything funny
folks.
to do. All right,
I'm
take it
gonna-
easy, guys.
Take
Okay.
care, guys. Thanks
Bye, Sid.
again.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.
Bye-bye.
Okay.